Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. This is part 2 of our two-part series called Back to School Virtually, and today's topic is problem solving. This is a webinar sponsored by the Family Focus Resource Center. My name is Victoria. I work for the Family Focus Resource Center at our CSUN office, and we are an agency that helps parents who have children with disabilities by providing parent-to-parent support and informational resources like this workshop. And I'll introduce my two colleagues. We have Kathleen from the Family Focus Resource Center. Do you want to say hello, Kathleen?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're really glad you could join us.
And next I'll introduce our presenter, Michelle Heid. Michelle is a board certified behavior analyst. She is the clinical director of an agency called Advanced Behavioral Pathways. And Michelle provides behavior services to individuals of all ages, including school-age children, which is our topic for today, how to manage virtual learning in our homes. And hopefully we'll hear lots of great problem-solving tips today. So Michelle, take it away. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Victoria and Kathleen and the Family Focus Resource Center for allowing us this opportunity. And we hope to provide some great information today. And like Victoria mentioned, we provide behavior services for a wide range of individuals, including to many school districts locally. So that is where we're going into classrooms and typically supporting teachers and students. And right now in the virtual world, we're doing that virtually. So we're able to observe classrooms and support teachers through consult and parents through consult and provide some student support. So we're hopefully going to share some information with you today that's going to help you navigate that virtual learning experience a little bit more successfully. I put a link in the chat to where you can find the presentation, the file, if you'd like to download that and reference it now or later. So let's get started. So the first thing that I'm telling a lot of families that we consult with is to remember to go back to the basics. So as Victoria mentioned, this is a second part of a two-part series. If you weren't able to view the session we did a couple weeks ago, that can be accessed via the Family Focus Resource Center YouTube channel. And there we provided some preparation strategies for virtual learning, really how to get ready for virtual learning. But I would say if you're having some struggles, go back and review that and just think about the basics. So some of the basic things are reduce distractions and create a positive learning environment. I was talking to a mom this week and she had just watched our week 1 webinar and had some more questions. And we started talking about, what else is going on in the home. And she has an 8-month-old baby and she's got a first grader and her husband and her are both working from home. And so there's just a lot of distractions in the environment. And we talked about ways to really reduce distractions, turn off the television and create a really positive learning environment for her first grader who's now doing school from home. And while the mom had watched the first webinar, I think, this is just very different for all of us having school going on in our homes. And there's a lot of things that we can do to really help our kids have more attention and really benefit better from their virtual learning. So some of the basics, make sure you prepare ahead of time. And that includes preparing the area, preparing the tech, and the supplies. So just really ensuring that you have everything that you need to for your student to access their virtual learning successfully. We're encouraging everyone to use things like timers, and those might be digital timers or sand timers. Sand timers are great because kids can really see the passage of time, or a timer that kind of goes away as time goes on really helps kids understand that passage of time. But one thing that may be really critical is a digital clock. So it takes kids usually several years to learn to read a traditional clock, and they may need a digital clock to reference if their teacher's saying log in at 8:30. Well, a first grader is going to have difficulty identifying 8:30 on their own, but if we start to teach them how to reference a digital clock, that might be really helpful. And this is actually something we often recommend when we're in traditional classrooms too, is, they'll say circle time or recess is at 10 o'clock, and the kids are trying to reference a regular analog clock, and they can't really read it. So just providing classrooms with a digital clock is something we often recommend. Try to have a consistent schedule so that the child is going to bed at the same time every day and getting up at the same time. And then I know school schedules are not consistent day to day. I know some teachers are keeping them very consistent. You log on for morning meeting at 8:30 every morning, and other teachers, it's not consistent from day to day, but everything else around that should remain consistent. And then you should be reviewing the night before, what is the expectation in the morning, so that everyone's kind of ready and on the same page. Then you really want to make sure that your tech is prepared. And something we're noticing is that you may be using one main computer, and then that computer isn't available or isn't working, and so you don't have those websites that you need. So we're suggesting that you have your logins and your websites ready in multiple locations. So that may be written down on a piece of paper that your child can access and use no matter what device they're using to log in. And then save those websites as favorites on your main computer. So if there's a main Chromebook or computer that your student is using every day, make sure that you save those websites for easy access. And then make sure the computer is fully charged or near an outlet, and that you have the cord ready and available. So as I'm getting ready for this webinar today, my computer is 100% charged, but it's also plugged in. Ooh, but my light is not plugged in. So if I go dark in the middle, it's because I'm not taking my own advice. Oops. But make sure that doesn't happen to your child. We are noticing, we noticed this week, maybe some of you noticed this, a large Zoom outage that impacted everything from schools to court proceedings. I thought that was pretty interesting, the impact that Zoom outages are now having on all of our lives. If you're having, trouble logging in, you may want to just contact the school to report, because they may say, yes, it's because Wi-Fi is down at the school and the teacher's not able to log in, or Zoom is down everywhere and we're just not able to log in. We heard from one family this week that when the large Zoom outage happened, they thought it was their computer, so they ran to get another computer and another computer. So we also recommend having a buddy in the class that maybe you can just contact quickly via text or call, or you having the same problems. Yeah, Johnny's not able to log on either. It must be not just us, but it's a larger issue. And then you want to ensure that you have access to the lessons through Google Classroom that your student does, so that they can, really see what's being assigned and see what's due. And then you may want to, kind of look over their shoulder and get familiar with what that is a little bit, so that you can, as a parent, be really ready to help. If you're having further technical issues, troubleshoot with the classroom teacher. I talk to parents who can't access this program or that program because of the computer that they're using, or they just needed some troubleshooting assistance. And so contact your child's classroom teacher. And if you can't figure it out, then you may be able to access IT to get further help. I heard of a parent that really needed IT support to get access to one of the programs. And then just really make sure you have access to all the programs that your child is using. So, there's all these different names. Some are using Zoom and Google Meet and Clever and, other websites. Just make sure that your child has access to all of those programs that are being used in the classroom. We're also noticing that, there may be some struggles with work-life balance. So when you're all doing, work and school, all at home, all in the same spot, we're noticing a lot of parents and children are having difficulty with that balance. So some things we're suggesting is begin with a schedule that's similar to when school is in session. So again, having those regular bedtimes and then getting up at the same time, getting ready for school, sitting down, logging into your learning, and then getting up, taking breaks, taking lunch to a different area, going outside if you can. And then make sure you're maintaining and reviewing your calendar or your schedule so that everyone's really aware of what's happening day to day. And you may need to involve the whole family. We heard from a mom, who said, like, as school started, the whole family wasn't going to school. So they weren't really adopting all of these new schedules. They weren't going to bed early. So in this case, it was dad and some other or older children who weren't going to bed early. And then the child was staying up, so they really needed to involve the whole family to adopt a school-like schedule. Another good tip is just ask your child how you can support them. So, what do they need from you? What kind of supports can you provide? And in some instances, we need to see parents, stepping away and sitting, next to your child and not having them sit on your lap, and then moving further away to create more independence so that your child is accessing their education more independently. We're seeing a lot of parents, really kind of hover and talk during the lessons, and, do things that they may not even know are really disrupting the child's access to education. And you have to remember that where many of our children need a lot of support, we're also wanting them to become independent. So how as parents can we really set them up for success to be more independent? One way we can do that and balance this is really to schedule our time, their time, and our time together. So I'm encouraging parents to schedule time for your child and what their schedule is going to look like, and then what your schedule is going to look like compared to theirs, and then when you're going to be spending time together so that they know when they're going to be on their own and independent, when you're going to be there to support them, and then what you're going to do with your time during those times. I'm experiencing a lot of this right now because I'm actually helping my brother out with his 5-month-old baby. And so we're doing a lot of scheduling my time, baby time, together time, and we're having to really abide by, a pretty tight schedule to make sure that everyone's needs are met. We're also noticing that, kids are having trouble staying engaged. It's difficult to, stay engaged to the computer for long periods of time. So what we can do is, again, set them up for success by creating an environment where they're really able to access their learning as independently as possible without a lot of distractions. So, some things we're seeing when we're logging into classrooms is some students are sitting in chairs, they seem, attentive, there's not a lot of distractions. That's what we want to see. But we're also seeing students who are, laying on their bed or a bed with a couple other siblings, all kind of in the screen, meaning that, they're kind of exposed to those potential distractions at the same time. So how can we set up each child in the household to have that success? And we talked about a lot of that in the previous webinar, so go back and look at some of that. Reviewing the schedule, this is something they do in classrooms often. So they come in the morning and they review the schedule for the day so the kids know what's expected. And then as they move through the day, they keep reviewing the schedule periodically throughout the day. Kids really need that to stay engaged and understand the expectations and know what's coming next. So, if you're hopefully the classroom teachers are doing this, where they're reviewing the schedule when they're in their live sessions and letting the kids know when to log back on. But, you want to do that with your child too. Get them started in a session. So, set them up, help them get logged in, and then step aside. And, if you need to remain close by, but maybe out of the camera so they're being as independent as possible. But maybe you can walk away and let them know when you're, with Mrs. Miller's class, I'm going to be getting my work done. And you may, sit nearby, but also kind of engaged with your own work, which is also modeling that engagement for your child. Now, the first grader I was talking about earlier, mom is not working right now, but I told her kind of fake it, find something that she can sit and do while her child is doing the schoolwork so that she's modeling some of those same behaviors. And mom actually said, oh, I've wanted to read this book and I've wanted to, start working on some of this makeup business that I want to do. And I said, okay, set that up so that you're doing that at the same time that your child is doing their schoolwork, and you guys can, do that together. Again, you can get them started and then move over to your own task to model those same behaviors. And then again, if you're sitting and doing work at the same time, then you're not creating a lot of distractions by like moving around in the background and cleaning and watching television and things. Let them know when you're going to be back. So if you're going to walk away, let them know, I'll be back in 5 minutes. I'll be back in 10 minutes to check on you, so that they just know what to expect. That's something I teach a lot of adults in classrooms who are in classrooms supporting students, is kind of this swoop in and help and then swoop out. But often we tell them to tell the students when they're going to come back to support them, so the students know what to expect. And then you may want to work kind of nearby, again, to keep that eye out for when they need prompting or additional support. We know right now it's really difficult for everyone to maintain those connections. So you may want to connect with other students. A strategy, one mom I was talking to this week said her son is really struggling because he really wants those social connections with his peers, and there's 20 other kids logging on at the same time, so he's not getting some of that. And I said, well, reach out to one or two of them and set up sessions with an individual student afterwards, so maybe they're doing some independent work together, if that's appropriate, or they're just having that social time where they can play or share information with one another, but they can kind of get that need met. And then if it's appropriate to have them both work on work together, then I think it's a lot easier to get your work done for some kids if you have somebody to kind of talk to, or at least stay engaged, and like, we're both going to do our math at this time, and do it together. So you may find one or two who can be those virtual study buddies, and this might also be that family or that person you can kind of check in with to see, did I miss anything, or why can't I log into Zoom, or what happened to Mrs. Miller, she's not here today, those kinds of things. You may have a buddy that you can kind of ask some of those questions. So try setting up virtual meetings with friends, just to maintain those connections, so that once our kids do go back to school, they feel connected with the people that are there, that are going to be in their classroom. Maybe they have the opportunity to get to know one or two of the students, especially if they don't know a lot of kids in the class already, so that once they do go back to school, they're really ready to be part of a classroom community. If your child needs some homework help, they should be trying to do homework independently, but if they need some help, you may want to make sure that they really understood the lesson. So that may take some reteaching or review of the lesson. And if your child needs a lot of that, it might be important that you do stay nearby to hear some of those lessons from the teacher if you can. But again, try to allow your child to be as independent during that virtual classroom time as possible. You want to make a list of pending homework assignments and then check the ones off as they've been completed. That's a really great kind of self-monitoring strategy, that if you start that with your child when they're young, they can really do that and learn to do that on their own. And that may really, again, kind of help them become more independent and do some of those things in the future. As your child really gets used to kind of the virtual learning and lessons, and if they've seen you make lists of their assignments, you may start having them do some of that on their own. Maybe they can sit and make a list of the assignments with your help and check off the ones that they've done. So often when we start doing things like this, making lists of assignments or creating calendars or schedules, that's actually something that we can start teaching the kids to do on their own. And for some kids, they really enjoy doing it and become very independent. And I think I told this story during another webinar, but I was actually working with a child, 8 or 9 years old, and he really liked making his schedules, and he loved making a calendar. And mom really thought, oh my gosh, he's going to get so dependent on like having it all written out. But then when she realized that that's what we do as adults, is we write out our calendars and we have them all. And he actually learned independently many years ago, before this was like a really big thing, to create like a Google calendar, and then he would print it and put it on his wall in his room. So that's a really great strategy that your child may be able to learn very early on, simply by us teaching them, modeling for them, and then kind of encouraging them to do some of it themselves. As much as possible, if your child can't write the schedule themselves, or they can't write the list of assignments, can they tell you what to write? Can they sit there and do it with you? And you can say, okay, what's your math assignment? And then you write down what they tell you. Okay, what is your social studies assignment? They tell you and you write it down. Or when you're making a daily schedule, okay, what comes after your morning meeting? Oh, I have a snack break. They can tell you and you can write it down. And this is actually something that we recommend for people of any age. So again, Victoria mentioned that we work with people of all ages. And when we're working in day programs or group homes, this is often something that we're teaching people to teach those that they're supporting. And I've had adults who learn to do this and really enjoy doing it. And it just kind of becomes a part of their daily check-in and really helps them move through their day successfully. There are a lot of homework help sites and resources. I know in Santa Clarita, the libraries are offering some of that homework support. So you may be able to access some of those, what we would kind of call generic resources that are available in the community for homework help. I know also some families and districts are kind of grouping together. And, so if you have a fourth grader, but you know a family who has a seventh grader or an eighth grader, somebody who's a little bit older, you may want to pair up with them so that their child can help your child with some of the homework help instead of you doing it all. I mean, there's so many benefits from that, because then it becomes a social experience. And it also is that sometimes we don't necessarily know how to help, because it was many, many years ago since we were in fourth grade. But for a seventh grader, that may be a little bit easier. So think about if you have other people that you can ask to help support your child, either in person or virtually. I know some families too have, kind of created these little pods. So maybe 2 or 3 families that get together and work together and help. All the kids kind of help each other, and then they can have that in-person support and socialization. But every family has to do what they're comfortable with. So accessing virtual support may be the way to go, or creating a pod to get that in-person help might also be helpful for your family. We also have to remember to allow breaks, but just really breaks as needed. So, kids are all kind of getting used to this virtual learning. We know that this isn't really going to be a short-term thing. We think that virtual learning is going to go on for several weeks. So we really want to ensure that kids are able to get breaks as they need. And those might be movement breaks or snack breaks, just depending on what your child needs. And you may need to encourage some of those movement breaks and, move about the house, or even get out of the house, take a walk around the block, go get the mail, little things like this to kind of get in some of that movement. I know I have to remind myself of that too. And then I kind of like this slide, like if all else fails. So, we don't have the answers for everything, unfortunately, but this is just some of the, strategies that we're suggesting is take note of what works and what doesn't, because you might find a solution that works and you use that solution, and then a couple weeks later you have a similar problem, but you may forget if you didn't kind of write down or kind of somehow take note of what works. My biggest example of this is not really related to virtual learning, but hopefully will resonate with some of you, is that when my son gets really upset, when he was very young, it would always help to give him a drink of water. And I couldn't say, go get a drink of water. I had to just hand him water, and he would drink it, and something about that would help him calm down. Well, he's about to turn 20 in a couple weeks, and that same strategy still works. Now, he doesn't get as upset as he once did, but I still know that if I hand him something to drink when he's upset, that's going to help him calm down. It's just always worked. And so I just have to always remember that. And I've even taught him to remember that too. So for your child, what works? And then take note of what doesn't. Like, we did the water thing and that went really awry and it didn't work. So we don't want to keep doing that. Every child is going to have those strategies that work for them. And we just need to kind of keep track of those things. Keep a log of the services and supports your student is receiving. So most students, if you're on this webinar today, it's likely that your child has an IEP or is receiving special education services. And you really want to keep a log of the services and supports that they're getting during this time, because we're hearing that some districts and some classrooms are doing a great job of providing behavior services, speech, occupational therapy that best meets the students' needs in this virtual learning environment. We're also hearing from some families, I haven't heard from my IEP team in several months. I don't know what they're doing to support my child. I don't even know who my teacher's child is yet, and it's weeks into school. So make sure that if that's the case, that you're keeping a log of those supports. And then keep track of those issues that come up so that, again, you can report that back to the IEP team as you have IEP meetings, like, oh, the Chromebook, wasn't working and we didn't get a replacement for 2 weeks, so they weren't able to log in. Those kinds of things are things that you should keep track of. And then you also want to keep track of actions you took to resolve the issue. The Chromebook wasn't working and I emailed the teacher, and I emailed the principal, and I emailed them again 2 days later. You may want to keep track of dates of things that you took those actions so that you can really demonstrate your actions to support your child. And hopefully not, but maybe where the district has dropped the ball or failed, because we all know that our children need certain services to access the curriculum and meet their needs. And if they're not receiving them during this time, then we may need to have some logs to kind of back that up. You may want to take some data, including video, if needed, to share the concerns. So I heard from somebody today, and they said, I was working with this is somebody on an IEP team, said I was working with a child, and it looked like they were attending, and it looked like everything was good in the classroom, but mom was taking a video from the side, and the child was actually playing or watching something on the iPhone or on a phone, on a device, the entire session. So where the child looked like they were engaged through the computer, they really weren't. And the mom was having some real difficulties trying to make change with the child in that area. So, kids are really smart, and they're learning that, they can just close the computer, or they can walk away, or they can tell you that they were done. We had a parent, say, well, he just said that class was over, and, I don't really know how to check on that. So, you may want to take some data and have some of those videos to kind of back up some of your concerns. And I know for me as a service provider, seeing video may be really helpful for me to actually help your concerns. So for instance, this parent of the first grader, we have all the proper releases. And so they sent me some video of the child engaged in their independent work to try to get more individualized support and solutions. And I can tell you that was really, really helpful for me as a service provider to see. So make sure that you're doing that if that would be needed to help support your child. And then again, if you've tried everything, contact your IEP team, and if the IEP team as a whole is not responding, is there one person on the team that you can reach out to for support who will respond? Hopefully, if I'm the provider on your child's IEP team, I am trying to be really responsive every time a parent reaches out, because this is just such a difficult time for parents that we really want to make sure that we're supporting and meeting their needs. So try to reach out to the team in general, or that one person on the team who you really think might be able to help or support you. An IEP team typically has a case manager, and that person may be your go-to person that's really responsive, or it may be somebody else. But find that person who can be your go-to, and make sure to actively communicate with them if you're having difficulties. And then this is a big one, I think, for a lot of us, is just, kind of these things to keep in mind as we're all navigating, a really difficult learning experience for kids and parents and families and teachers and paraeducators. I mean, everybody is just really trying to adapt and learn something very new. And the expectations for virtual learning, they really should be different than in-person learning. In person, if your child has a one-to-one, that one-to-one is sitting with them and assisting them through that. And they have that because the IEP team has determined that that is what's needed to meet your child's needs. And right now, that may not be possible. So you want to just adjust your expectations. A lot of us are saying we want to help kids just maintain the skills that where they're at, maintain the learning that they've had, so that they don't have loss of skills or loss of learning during this time. But many of us are not expecting big growth during this time, because it's a really challenging time for a lot of us. There's a lot of different, stressors, whether it's the virtual learning, the different schedules, everybody home at the same time. I mean, it's just something that we're all really struggling with. Listen to your student to figure out what works. You may actually ask them, how you can help, what you can do to help support them. But you may have to just watch to see, is what I'm doing helping, or is what I'm doing making things worse? And you may have to kind of just slow down a little bit to observe some of that. I know when I'm, talking with parents, they've got multiple children, they're trying to juggle work and home, and it's just, so difficult. But sometimes I just want people to just slow down to really see what is happening through the day, what can we fix, what can we do better, and what's working for Johnny. What's working, and I say Johnny just as a general name of a child. If you have multiple children, what's working for one may be different than what's working for another. So, no two children we really don't parent them alike. And you really have to do what is necessary for each one of them to meet their needs if you have multiple children. I figured that out early, and I only had one. And my hat goes off to parents who have multiple children, especially right now, because we're all at home, and you're trying to meet the needs of multiple children. So just, again, keep that in mind, that what works for one isn't necessarily going to work for everyone. What we're finding a lot right now is a lot of parents are reporting some really amazing successes with independent skills. So, maybe they're not logging into their online math lesson every time and getting and understanding all the math and getting all of their math work done, but they're learning some great independent skill that is actually going to be more beneficial possibly for them in the future. Maybe they're learning how to get through their schedule independently. They're learning how to wake up on their own and help get their breakfast, get dressed on their own. So a lot of parents are shifting their focus from academics, because many of us aren't we're not teachers, and I'm definitely not skilled in teaching academics, but I know how to teach life skills. So maybe as a parent, you want to shift your focus to something that you're really good at, that you can focus on and teach them during this time instead of just focusing solely on the academics. So you may want to just practice those home-based skills. So, maybe that's cooking, or maybe it's maintaining the house, taking care of the house, doing some household chores. Maybe it's gardening. Maybe it's learning to brush their teeth, and you practice that several times a day, instead of putting your focus on academics that might be difficult to teach as a parent. You also want to remember that learning can happen anywhere, anytime. So, right now we're saying we're logging into our virtual lessons and we're sitting in front of the computer doing our learning, but learning's also happening when you're, watching a documentary with the family later in the day, or we've been watching that Zac Efron show about Earth, and, learning all kinds of cool stuff. So learning can happen anywhere. It can happen when you go out on a walk. You can look for plants or flowers or do a scavenger hunt. It can happen when you're out in the community. So just take advantage of those learning opportunities. And that it might also mean that we have to slow down a little bit. You also want to remember to provide reinforcement to keep kids engaged. So that reinforcement might be just some verbal praise. It might be specific verbal praise, which is a really important thing to do. Wow, I like how you got up on your own today and you got dressed right away. That was a great job. Telling them exactly what they did that you want to see them repeat is that specific verbal praise that can really help them understand what your expectations are, why you're proud of them, and to repeat those behaviors. You may have to use some type of token system where you're doling out tickets or tokens for those appropriate behaviors that then they're collecting. They use these in schools all the time, and it can be really helpful. And we've already done some webinars on some of that. So go back and watch some of the previous webinars if you want more information on that. But, other reinforcement might be just walking up to your child, at that 10-minute mark that you said you'd check back with them at, and encouraging them because they're staying on task and doing what you've expected. The mom of the first grader I was talking to, we were talking about, she really needs to set a timer for herself to then come back and check in with her kid, because she's got a baby and because she's got household chores. She goes off to do those things and then kind of forgets to come back and check on the first grader. So I, set her up with setting her own timer for herself to then come back and give that specific praise to the first grader, and then go back and, do the other things that the baby needs and other things that need to be done, because she doesn't want to be sitting there all the time, because again, we're trying to create that independence. And then something I think that is just so critically important right now is to use modeling of good habits. So, kids are on a lot of screen time because they're doing the virtual learning. And then we know that kids love games and tablets and things like that. But, maybe you need to have non-screen time periods of the day where nobody's using screens. We as moms put our phones away, dads put our phones away, and read a book with our child, or set them up to play something with no screen, and then we are doing a non-screen activity. I think that those modeling of those habits can be really important. And often what I'm seeing is that, mom might be holding the baby while the first grader's over here doing the lesson, but mom's also on the phone. How do we really model some of those good habits for our kids? And even modeling of like getting up every day and getting dressed and showering. I mean, some of those are getting really difficult because we don't have anywhere to go. So I did it today. You could be super proud of me because I knew I was going to be on camera for this webinar. So I have my hair done and my makeup done, and I'm dressed appropriately. But doing that every day is getting difficult. So it's just really important that we're modeling those same habits that we expect in our kids, because as much as we tell them to do as I say, not as I do, they really do just model a lot of the same habits and behaviors that they see from the people around them. So, maybe you're modeling all the good habits, maybe there's another sibling or family member in the household that you need to talk to also model good habits. You want to make sure that everyone is doing that. And here are some final thoughts. We're all learning to adapt. You know, this is difficult for every single one of us. It's difficult for our kids. Makes me really sad to think about, you know, a kindergartner's first day of kindergarten was sitting in front of a screen. It's difficult for parents who are, you know, trying to be teachers and parents and occupational therapists and speech therapists and, you know, all of those things all at once. Teachers are also adapting to, you know, virtual learning, and some of them are likely better than others. So I just think we have to remember that we're kind of all in this together, and that, you know, cliche is really true, that we're all learning to adapt to this new world of virtual learning. When things get off track, I just say it's okay. Tomorrow is a new day. So, you know, whatever happened today, you can put it away and you can start fresh tomorrow. We all have those days where we just want to pack it in. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that once in a while, to say, you know, okay, today's just not been a great day. We're going to take a break for the rest of the day and we're going to get back at it tomorrow. I know yesterday when I woke up, I just wasn't feeling it. And I just knew I wasn't going to be all that productive. And I just had to give myself the patience to have, you know, not a great day. Doesn't mean that I stayed in my pajamas all day. I tried to do my best, but it just wasn't as productive as I am some days. We're all in the same boat with virtual learning and online learning. So I'm talking to teachers who are struggling with learning the technology. I was on a paraeducator call just before this webinar where she was like, I've never really been on computers a whole lot. I'm in person with my students, and she's, you know, we're all learning. So just, you know, keep that in mind. If you're struggling, you're not the only one who's struggling. If you wish that the teacher were doing more, they're still learning too. Teachers are used to teaching in their classrooms with their kids, and some of them have been doing it for 20, 30 years, and then all of a sudden are adapting to this completely new way of doing things. So we're all in that same boat. We have to remember that kids don't have the skills that we do as far as like coping and managing and adapting, yet they're still struggling through the same situation. So, you know, I mentioned, like, I have an almost 20-year-old son, and I sometimes am getting frustrated with him. And then I realize he doesn't even have the coping skills that I do. And yet he's managing through a very difficult time. You know, college for him has been completely paused. His college is not even really going back online. So he's having to completely adapt to a whole new situation. And he's 20. Doesn't yet have the coping skills that I do. If you've got a 7-year-old, they don't have the coping skills yet that an adult does, but we're all, you know, trying to deal with it. So I guess it's, you know, give your child some grace and have some patience, and just, you know, try to remember that, that we're all really kind of struggling. And then final thought is, do what you can, but it's not going to be the same. Again, a lot of our kids are not going to make the same gains this year as we would have expected them to, but we're all in this together. So all the kids in 3rd grade are all really online learning. They're all going to be, you know, in a similar place when they go back to in-person instruction, because they've all been through this. It's not like half of the kids are in school getting traditional education and the rest are online learning, experiencing this loss. We're all, you know, every 3rd grader is experiencing kind of that similar situation. So don't worry that your child is going to get so far behind the other kids, because they're all going to get equally behind, likely, except for the case where we do know that there's inequities and disparities as far as like access to technology and things like that, that not everyone really has. Which will likely lead to, you know, larger disparities or learning loss. Try to resolve those if you're in that position. And I know Family Focused Resource Center and school districts are all trying to help families as best they can, to ensure that that those inequities don't result in further learning loss for children from those families that are experiencing those difficulties. So do what you can do, but it's not going to be the same. You know, you're only one person. You're not going to be able to be the teacher, the parent, the occupational therapist, the speech therapist, the physical therapist, the nurse, the everything that your child needs. Our kids have teams for a reason, and we can't be all of those hats for them. So just do the best that you can. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity to present today. The previous webinars are at this really long link that Kathleen has nicely put in the chat for all of you to access. There's some other really great webinars that we did at the end of the school year last year that also would be helpful. And they're broken down into different topics. So just pick the topic that you think you would benefit from. You don't have to watch them all at the same, like in order. You can just pick and choose. And then Victoria put a couple comments in the chat. Yeah, breaks from screens are really important, even for us. I have to remember to close it out, get up, go on a walk, and then, you know, kind of come back. Especially if you get headaches, or you can get those cool glasses that help block some of that glare from the screen, resulting in less headaches. Also, if your child is possibly getting headaches, you may want to go for a medical evaluation because they may need glasses. I just want to thank you all for your time, and we do have some time for questions. So you can raise your hand and maybe Kathleen will call on you, or you can type it in the chat, or I'm going to put my email in the chat. And please, if you have any further questions or you need additional support, please email me. Victoria?